Today on The Truth in Crisis.
Our Lady would never finish a sentence with the word etc. And so forth. So there's a second document, and it's a shocking document. He
used the term explosive contents.
Yes.
It's explosive.
And so this is now the fact that he's saying this in public, and in fact now these various Vaticanistas are reviewing the book, and they're not saying it's not true. They're saying it makes you think.
Yes, I think every major Italian newspaper ran a review of the book, and none of them tried to talk it down or anything like that. They all said this book makes one thing.
One part of the story of Fatima has been locked away from public view by those in power at the Vatican. That portion is known as the Third Secret.
Fatima scholars believe unanimously that the secret begins with the one sentence, "In Portugal, the dogma of the faith will always be preserved," etc. End quotation. The etc. indicates that the Virgin of Fatima had a lot more to say about this subject of dogma, but the obvious implication of the statement that in Portugal the dogma of the faith will always be preserved is that elsewhere the dogma will not be preserved.
As long as I hold on to the dogma of the faith, I'm a Catholic. But if I lose the faith by following the bad example or the bad advice of cardinals or even a pope, then I leave the church because I've no longer held on to the Catholic faith. So the integrity of the church itself, in itself, is not in question, but the integrity of people's faith and their salvation is definitely in question.
And Fatima scholars unanimously concurred that this third secret, of which that sentence is the beginning, refers to a crisis of faith and discipline in the church that would begin around 1960. Why do I say 1960? Because when Sister Lucy was asked about when the secret would be revealed, she said that Our Lady wished it to be revealed upon her death, but in no event later than 1960. And when asked why 1960, she said, because it will be clearer then.
On June 26, 2000, Vatican officials released what they said was the entire third secret of Fatima, but the published documentation does not include any of the words of Our Lady of Fatima that are indicated by the mysterious etc.
Antonio Socci, an Italian journalist and television personality, first accepted that the entire third secret was revealed and said so publicly. But as he investigated further, he too found strong reason to believe there is more to the secret than what was published in June 2000.
Hello, my name is Don Pinnell, and welcome to The Truth in Crisis. We have all heard about the third secret of Fatima, but what about the fourth secret of Fatima? There is a new book on the market by a well-respected Italian journalist, Antonio Socci, which details the fact there may very well be much more to the third secret of Fatima which has not been released to the public as requested by Our Lady. This is something that you and your family need to know. Please stay tuned. Please welcome Father Nicholas Gruner and John Venari as they discuss this new development regarding Fatima and the third secret.
Welcome. Today with me is John Venari, editor of the Catholic Family News. We're going to talk about the fourth secret of Fatima.
Yes.
Yes. You've written a little bit about this book in a recent review.
Yes. We had talked about it on a previous program, the fact that here we have a mainstream Catholic journalist, this man named Antonio Socci, who became interested in the Fatima secret, completely accepting
the Vatican's
position that it had revealed everything in its June 26, 2000 document. The more he studied and the more he researched and the more he asked questions, he found that to his own reluctance, he said, I had to submit. I had to come to the conclusion. One of the things, too, that got him wondering was when he requested an interview with Cardinal Bertone. Archbishop Bertone at the time was one of the drafters of this June 26 document, and Sochi asked him for an interview on the subject, and Cardinal Bertone never responded. He thought that was strange for two reasons. First of all, because the Cardinal had already invited Sochi in the past to speak in his diocese. He was on good terms, friendly terms with this Cardinal. So why is he not responding? Well, that's the second thing, because there's probably something to hide, something that he does not want to talk about. So that was one of the many things that made Sochi think there is more to this than what was released on June 26th.
Well, in fact, Mr. Sochi points out at various times in The Devil's Final Battle, he quotes it time and time again. He points
in his
out,
book.
In his book, yes. And in fact, I think at first he said he kind of rejected the arguments from this book and others like it, but his mind was open to something struck him when Sister Lucy died. There was an article in the newspaper saying that they sealed her room, and one of the other authors, one of the other journalists in Rome, a very well-known man, Vittorio Messuri, had suggested there was something to hide there. I'm not quite sure how he puts it. I don't want to misquote.
Oh, well, what he said, what Messuri said, words to the he talked about the third secret and the fact that there's many questions regarding its interpretation, questions even regarding if it is complete. He didn't use those words, but words raising questions as to whether we have the whole thing.
That's when Sochi re-examined for the first time. Because from the year 2000, when the June 26 document, Sochi came to their defense, saying, "The Vatican had released it all." It was only that started asking questions, and then the more, as you say, he asked, the more. But this book then just came out towards
November
the end.
22nd, 2006.
And it's. I've been reading it, and I've been reading it more thoroughly. It's very detailed. He goes into a lot of points that the Devil's Final Battle raised. He raises some other points that I thought of that have not been raised in Devil's Final Battle, and he raises some other points that I hadn't thought of.
Such as?
Well, for one thing, he points out, first of all, he has a new fact, and we might have mentioned this in the last program, about the Archbishop Secretary of John 23rd. And so it's a new fact which he brings out, that this Archbishop points out, under some questioning from Solideo, he says, yes, there are two documents.
It's the first time we actually have this, a retired Vatican prelate admitting that there were two texts.
And that's something. But there's other little details that come out. He, for example, he writes it first of all by pointing out the mystery. What is these inconsistencies? And then towards the end of the book, he starts solving all the mysteries. Mm-hmm. And it's not just this testimony of one Vatican official. We have the testimony, for example, of Cardinal Ottaviani, which we know, of course, already, which is it's a single sheet of paper.
Right.
Ottaviani says a single sheet of paper. Sister Lucy says a single sheet of paper.
Bishop Venancio, too.
Bishop Venancio says a single sheet of paper.
And the reason Bishop Venancio knew that was because in 1957, he had the envelope containing the secret, and he held it up to the light.
And he counted the lines.
He counted the lines. He said it's on a single sheet of paper in 26 or 27.
20 to 25 lines.
Yes, but what the Vatican released in June 26
was 4 sheets of paper on 62 lines.
Right.
And so these are some of these facts he renews, and of course he doesn't just go to the Devil's Final Battle. We give the references where we got them from, and he goes back to those primary sources himself. And then there was some other fact, I think you might have mentioned, that the fact that, and it was not brought out in Devil's Final Battle, that on the 27th of June 1963, Archbishop Capivilla says that Paul VI read the secret, but Cardinal Bertone says it was on the 27th of March.
And Cardinal Bertone says that in the official June 26 document.
Yes. And so here you have these two different dates, 2 different years.
26th of March 1965.
65, yes. And so these different dates, this is of course what led Archbishop Capivilla to finally admit, yes, there are 2 documents. And so there are 2 documents, there are 2 different histories. The 2 different documents talk about 2 different things. The one the Vatican released is about the vision of the Pope being shot, but the other document is about what Our Lady said, that in Portugal the dogma of faith will be preserved. Every Fatima expert has always said that means that Our Lady is because it says etc. Our Lady put the words etc. And as of course he points out, Our Lady would never finish a sentence with the word etc. And so forth. So there's a second document, and it's a shocking document.
You used the term explosive contents.
Yes.
It's explosive.
And so this is now the fact that he's saying this in public, and in fact now these various Vaticanistas are reviewing the book, and they're not saying it's not true. They're saying it makes you think.
Yes, I think every major Italian newspaper ran a review of the book, and none of them tried to talk it down or anything like that. They all said this book makes one think, and the arguments in here need to be considered.
Yes, and so I would urge. I hope that we get the book gets translated into English so people can benefit from reading it themselves. It certainly does make one think.
Well, one of the reasons, just to bring the viewing audience up to speed here on a point, the fact that one of the reasons that many of us believe that there was a second text that talked about a great apostasy in the church, we just weren't, just dreaming this up ourselves. We were relying on those who have read the secret, those who are knowledgeable on the secret, those who had spoken about it, such as Cardinal Ratzinger, such as Father Alonso, who was the archivist of Fatima for how many years, 30-some years, who knew Sister Lucy, the Bishop of Fatima, Cardinal Ottaviani, Cardinal Oddi.
Yes.
All these men said the same thing.
Well, for example, Cardinal Chappi, who is a papal theologian, there's only one papal theologian, and in the 20th century there's been no papal theologian like Cardinal Chappi. He is a papal theologian to Pius XII, John XXIII, Paul VI, John Paul I, John Paul II. He was there for over 30 years. And here you have the papal theologian. He's chosen because of his eminent knowledge of theology. And he says, in the third secret it is foretold, among other things, the great apostasy in the church begins at the top. Now, in that one sentence, he's packed a lot of material into it. The great apostasy, there's only one great apostasy. It's predicted in sacred scripture. It's predicted in the Bible, which tells us that a time will come when there will be a great revolt. What Cardinal Chappi is saying is that great revolt has begun at the top in the church from the Vatican, where he works. And he's saying that this, what he doesn't say is that the third secret is a prophecy for our time. We can thank Frere Michel for pointing out the third secret started at least by 1960, if not before, but we can certainly say by 1960, it doesn't end, the prophecy doesn't end until Russia is consecrated according to the request of Our Lady of Fatima. We're in that period of time, and so we're living in that time of prophecy. Well, that prophecy we're living in is a prophecy of the great apostasy. So we are in a particularly dangerous time for our souls. That's why it's not a matter of curiosity for people to read this. It's a matter for the people to save their souls.
Well, I understand that he does urge that the secret be revealed for our good.
Yes.
Our Lady is giving us a message that is very important, so terrible that Sister Lucy herself could not write it down without a special command.
And even then,
You know.
in fact, she said the bishop suggested she write it down because she was sick in September. She had been sick for quite some time. They thought she was going to die, and so the bishop didn't want her to go to her grave without writing down the secret. So he suggested to her, well, maybe it would be a good idea if you just write the secret down, put it in an envelope, seal it up. No one's going to look at it. But she said, that's too big a responsibility for me. But if you, Your Excellency, command me to do it, I will obey. And she was very known to be a very obedient subject. So he thought about it for a month. He prayed about it. He gave her a formal written command. I order you in God's name to write this secret down. Even then, she immediately said it. She took her notes, her paper. She went to her room. She took her pen. And for over 2 months, she tried to write it down. And she could not bring herself to write it down. It was that terrible. Now, she talked about the annihilation of nations.
Exactly.
She showed the vision of hell, terrible vision, and she didn't have trouble writing that. But this, she could not bring herself to write. It's something horrendous.
And it's something more than what, of course, was released by the Vatican,
yes.
of the vision of the bishop dressed in white who is now all this is terrible. He's climbing the mountain and he's killed along with bishops and cardinals and priests and laity around him. But that's not as, she wrote about annihilation of nations.
Yes, well, even the annihilation of nations wasn't hard for her to write.
No.
She didn't bring, this is more than the annihilation of nations. And so
this had to do with the only thing that could cause her to respond this way is that it was something that affected the church very deeply.
Yes.
And affected souls very deeply.
Yes. And well, in fact, this is what And of course, the apostasy is much worse than schism. It's much worse than heresy. Apostasy is all that plus and a lot more. And this is, and Cardinal Chapter tells us in the third secret, is foretold that the apostasy in the church begins at the top. So saying that it comes, as Father Alfonso said, it talks about the negligences of the upper hierarchy. He's talking about bishops and cardinals and possibly the Pope, the negligences. And of course, as Sochi brings out something very interesting, he quotes Pope Adrian, the last non-Italian pope before John Paul II. And Adrian, in 1523, is talking about the terrible things going on at that time, saying this is a chastisement for the bad priests, the bad bishops, the bad pope, and he also points out it's also the fault of the lay people for not praying, for not being better. So it's an interesting passage. It's only less than a page long, and he says, well, this is really what the third secret is about. Is the third secret, we have these things because of the bad leadership, but it's also because the people are not living the lives of Christian life the way they should be as well. And so he ties that in as well. He points out that there has been quite possibly powerful forces outside the church impeding the Pope who wants to release the secret. And so the popes and other people around the Pope have said things, without not saying it's a secret, said things such as the Pope at John Paul II at Fatima, saying the message of Fatima is a divine warning not to follow the tail of the dragon that drags down 1/3 of the... Well, there you have a very simple thing. Yeah. He's saying it's from the Apocalypse. It's chapter 12, verse 4. And both John Paul II and Paul VI, both when they went to Fatima, always come back to chapter 12, verse 1 of the Apocalypse. I believe in the secret, Our Lady makes reference directly to that chapter and tells us we're living in that time. And so this is what he's trying to tell. I mean, we've written a lot about this, and I would urge people to read The Devil's Final Battle, because much of what he says in here is already said here. There's a few new things in here, but this gives a very... He unravels it, but he takes a lot of the facts and details that we've already raveled here. Of course, we're talking about two things in The Devil's Final Battle. One is the third secret, and the other is about the consecration of Russia not being done. So,
which she agrees with, too, the fact that it's not been done.
Yes. And so it's the fact that it's now gone mainstream for the first time that I know of, at least in Italy. I have hope and pray that, and our audience will pray too, that this book will be heard in quarters, and finally the Pope will release the whole secret, so that everyone... I know that Malachi Martin said on radio with Art Bell before millions of people, he said, when the secret is released, people will be on their knees in church and long lineups for confessions when they read the third secret. That had no effect. What was released by the Vatican didn't have any of that kind of effect.
Well, the effect was the associated, when they released on May 13th, 2000, that the bishop, this was just supposedly a prediction of the assassination of John Paul II. The Associated Press quoted a Portuguese man who said, "This can't be it.
Yeah.
All this happened in the pit. There has to be more."
Yes.
And many Catholics had the same reaction. Mother Angelica, the same reaction. There has to be more.
Yes.
It just didn't make sense that this was all the secret was.
Yeah, it's out of proportion. So this book certainly starts giving you something to, as does The Devil's Final Battle.
But the English-speaking, they can read The Devil's Final Battle and get the gist of what's...
Yes.
I shouldn't say more of the gist. Get the foundation of what's in Sochi's book.
Yes. And so but it's a great breakthrough for... And I ask you to pray that this book gets out in English as soon as possible so you can read it for yourself. And as I say, he's very detailed, and he's even got the studies by a Portuguese expert on that. When John 23rd said he was looking for, he had to get someone to translate it for him. On one occasion, he didn't need a translation because there's no regional or dialectic words. Whereas the second time he read it, he needed the help of a translator. Well, as what was released by the Vatican in 2000, June 26, 2000, which was announced on the 13th of May 2000, there's nothing...
There's no dialectical expressions, there's no regional thing. The expert explains that, yes.
And in fact, the expert also points out that the translation the Vatican provided wasn't really up to the mark compared to... But it didn't require dialectic, there's no words of regional nature.
Right.
Whereas
it's another clue that there are two texts.
Yes, all of those things. And so he's got many details which he brings out, but he points out that there's much more to it. and we really need to know it because it's for our salvation. And people can say, well, Father Gruner, you might think we have the apostasy, but that's your opinion. If you have the Blessed Virgin Mary's own words saying we're living in the apostasy, and what you have to do to protect yourself, go to the old Mass, do the things that the Church has always done, don't be taken in by novelties, say your prayers every day because you are in danger, you need my help, only Our Lady of the Rosary can help you. These kind of things, it'll be very specific, and very much a person can say, well, I don't care about these other people, they want to go to hell, I'm going to save my soul, I'm going to do what she says. That will come out in the third secret when it's finally released. We need to ask God and Our Lady to pray, to ask them to intervene so that we will get the whole text before it's too late for all of us. It's been good talking with you, John. And
Thank you, Father.
And we'll talk more about Fatima soon. God bless you.
We will return to our program in just a moment. But first, I would like to tell you about The Devil's Final Battle, a very special book that gives you more facts about the Fatima Message than we can fit into this program. It tells you the story of how the rejection of Our Lady's Fatima Message has led us into a crisis of unprecedented proportions. And more importantly, it tells you what you can do to help bring real peace and lasting security to our nation and to the world. As part of today's program, we are offering you this critically important new book for a donation of $10 or more. To order, call us at 1-888-FATIMA-1. That's 1-888-FATIMA-1. To sum up today's program, Father Gruner will explain what it has to do with you and how it links to Fatima.
In 1985, Frere Michel told me, and at the symposium we held inside Vatican City, that the third secret had to be released by the Vatican first, before God would grant the grace of the consecration of Russia. Of course, it is the consecration of Russia that will bring about world peace. But Our Lady asked for the secret to be released in 1960. That wasn't done. Now we know from Frere Michel and from The Devil's Final Battle, the book that we make available, as well as others, that the reason for not releasing the third secret is because it is very embarrassing to the policies and procedures and people that have put these in place for the last 40 years since the Second Vatican Council. This secret they are trying to keep hidden at no matter what cost. In fact, it's quite easy to see, if you read The Devil's Final Battle, that the whole text has not been released. However, they've been able to dismiss this book in the past by calling it just, well, it's by extremists, or people who just are Fatimists, as they call them in Italian. But they have not looked at the reasoning. The great development here is that here you have a mainstream author, well known, who's been connected to people in the Vatican. In fact, he's done work for both Cardinal Bertone as well as Cardinal Ratzinger in the past. And Cardinal Ratzinger has told Mr. Sochi privately that he thanks him for the sentiments that expressed his book, that he wrote his book. And so for a mainstream author like this to be writing, and then for the general public, I was at the publishers not so long ago, and the book is going quite well from their point of view. It's selling a lot of copies. It's the talk of the Vatican, inside the Vatican, as well as the mainstream press in Italy, front page news. This is a great development for the cause of Fatima, for the cause of the third secret finally being released. Because here they cannot dismiss him as an extremist, as a Fatimist, because in fact he defended their position. And he starts off his book by pointing out that he didn't believe The Devil's Final Battle. He thought it was too extreme. But in the end he said, I had to concede. Here you have an honest man, an honest journalist, examining the evidence and realizing that he's been wrong, and admits it. And then he goes on to demonstrate to anyone who's got the time to read his book that, in fact, there is another text. This is a great development, and we must thank God for this grace that finally the truth is getting through into the mainstream. It can't be exaggerated, the importance of this development, and we need more breaks like this for the Fatima Message, because if we don't listen in time, we will have various nations annihilated and the whole world enslaved by militant atheists or Satanists. That is, Our Lady herself tells us in the Fatima Message, Russia is the instrument of chastisement chosen by heaven to punish the whole world for its sins, unless we obtain beforehand the conversion of that poor nation. But we know the only way to get the conversion of that poor nation is for the Holy Father, the Pope, and the bishops to consecrate the country of Russia to the Immaculate Heart. If that is done in time, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If it's not done in time, then Russia will be the instrument of chastisement. But, Frere Michel points out, we won't have that take place until the third secret is released. This is a major step on the road to the releasing of the full third secret. Let us continue to pray a great deal for the Holy Father, so that he will do the consecration, and so that he will release the third secret in its entirety. I thank God for this great development, and we must continue by our prayers and our petitions to press for the full release of the third secret. And I thank Mr. Sochi for making such a convincing case beyond what was in the Devil's Final Battle to prove that there is indeed another text. In fact, he brings forward a witness, an eyewitness, who cannot be disputed, Archbishop Capuvilla, pointing out that yes, there is another text. It's all in his book. Let us pray the Rosary every day for the release of the secret, the whole secret soon. God bless you.
The Secret Still Hidden, written by attorney and Catholic commentator Christopher A. Ferrara, conducts a meticulous examination of a mass of evidence, including many recent disclosures and inconsistencies on the part of the Vatican Secretary of State, and demonstrates beyond doubt that a text of the third secret has been suppressed. Given the absolute urgency of the secret for every inhabitant of the planet, this book calls upon the Vatican to reveal the hidden words of the Virgin to the whole world before it is too late. Order your copy now. Call toll-free 1-888-FATIMA-1. That's 1-888-328-4621. Or online at www.secretstillhidden.com.
Thank you for joining us today. Please watch us next week when we introduce another exciting episode of The Truth in Crisis.
Keep current on the events that surround the world in the Fatima Message. Call 1-888-FATIMA-1 for your issue of the Fatima Crusader, the largest publication on Our Lady's urgent message. Receive your free copy of this quarterly publication by calling 1-888-FATIMA-1. Call now. For an in-depth look at the Fatima Message, log on to the Fatima Network website at www.fatima.org. Our Lady of Fatima said, "If my requests are granted, Russia will be converted and there will be peace. If my requests are not granted, Russia will spread her errors throughout the world, raising up wars and persecutions against the Church. The good will be martyred, the Holy Father will have much to suffer. Various nations will be annihilated." For more information, please call us at our toll-free number 1-888-FATIMA-1. That's 1-888-328-4621. You can also find out more on our website, www.fatima.org.